It is a great honor to introduce our next friend and a dear friend of Israel. Ellie Cohanim is a senior fellow at the Independent Women's Forum, host of a weekly show, Global Perspectives with Ellie Cohanim, for JNS Jewish News Syndicated. She previously served as U.S. Deputy Special Envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism at the United States State Department by appointment of President Donald Trump and the U.S. Secretary of State. Mrs. Cohanim was the first Iranian-born envoy, and led diplomatic initiatives leading to amazing historic initiatives, including working with the Abrahamic Accords. Let us welcome our dear friend, Ellie Cohanim.
So first of all, my deepest thanks to Apostle Mario Bromnick, who you just heard from. Thank you for that kind introduction. I had the honor of meeting the Apostle when I was a Deputy Special Envoy to combat anti-Semitism for the U.S. State Department. And even then, the first time that we met, the Apostle said to me, Ellie, the Jewish people are not alone. We are beside you. And every day and every moment that I've spent working with the Apostle Mario Bromnick, I have learned that he is beside us and that the Christian faith community are beside us. So thank you so much, Mario. I also want to thank our host, Rabbi Ephraim Goldberg, this incredible shul, for having us. And my older son turned to me and he said, Mom, why do they hate us? And I think it's the question that Jews have asked each other for millennia. Why do they hate us? Now, I'm not particularly interested in getting into the mind of a hater, but here are some facts for all of us to consider regarding Jews. Abraham, our father, is acknowledged by all traditions to be the father of monotheism. Abraham brought to the world the concept of a God and a creator. And this was at a time when the people around him were worshiping stars and trees and statues. With the growth of Abraham's family, we have the growth of Judaism and an entire religion that's based on law, justice, ethics, and morals. Very quickly, and in every society that the Jew has ever lived, the Jew became the moral conscience of that society. And many hated the Jew, and to this day hate the Jew, for bringing God, morality, ethics into the conversation, when often the haters want to build societies that are premised on power. Power, pure and simple. In today's world, those who are seeking to wield power often cloak themselves in the mantle of social justice. And they're building a certain narrative which we see is gaining ground more and more every day. That is the accusation that Jews are white, privileged neo-colonialists, and that Israel is a white, neo-colonialist apartheid state settled by ethnic and privileged white Jews who are to this day oppressing the brown-skinned rightful inhabitants of the land. And this is the lens that we find more and more young Americans, Jewish and non-Jewish, are perceiving Israel and events in Israel. Never was this narrative, which seeks to demonize Jews and demonize Israel, more powerful and widespread than in the recent May 2020 conflict, when Hamas rained down 4,000 rockets at Israeli cities and civilian population centers. And while this war was being waged against Israel, we witnessed a torrent of propaganda, lies, and slanderous accusations lobbied at Israel by major social media influencers, by members of the US Congress, and by Western media outlets, which together meant that Israel was simultaneously fighting an actual military war on its home front and a PR war in the international arena. Now, I want to pause for a moment and state that when I had the privilege of serving our great country in the Trump administration, our administration's policy was that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, full stop. And the reason why you heard that from President Trump, Vice President Pence, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, from Ambassador David Friedman, and everyone down the line, was because we knew full well that the hatred of the Jew among nations is no less vile than the hatred of the Jew. Now, going back to the most recent May Gaza conflict, what we saw was that this PR war, this TikTok intifada, which was being waged against Israel, had two prongs of attack. The first prong was what Jerusalem reported, a coordinated effort to slander and troll Israeli personalities on social media. Aviv Lusky, who's the CEO of a digital company for Israeli celebrities, said, quote, "This is the most extreme situation we've ever seen in terms of the number of anti-Israel responses. We're losing big time in this war when it comes to our image. The pro-Palestinian side has millions more hashtag supporters than we do." The second prong of the TikTok intifada was a rather long list of international celebrities and social media influencers who jumped into the fray to support Hamas and the Palestinians. Most notable were the Palestinian supermodel sisters Gigi and Bella Hadid, who together have almost 100 million followers on Instagram. The State of Israel's official Twitter account responded to a now notorious video in which Bella Hadid posted herself joining a crowd of protesters in Brooklyn where they were chanting, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." It should be noted that what Ms. Hadid is actually calling for is genocide against the Jews, because Israel holds 8 million Jews in her land. And the celebrity pylon continued from there. We saw pop stars, movie stars, comedians, people like Dua Lipa, Trevor Noah, Natalie Portman, Lena Headey, Roger Waters, all posting on their social media against Israel. And over in Pakistan, we saw Bollywood actress Veena Malik post a tweet was quoting Hitler, and she wrote, "I would have killed all the Jews of the world, but I kept some to show the world why I killed them." And last but not least was BLM, Black Lives Matter, weighed in, saying, quote, "It stands in solidarity with Palestinians." And to go on, they state, "We are a movement committed to ending settler colonialism in all forms, and we will continue to advocate for Palestinian liberation." The Marxist-inspired group added with the hashtag Free Palestine. And so we saw a deluge of the most vicious anti-Israel, pro-Hamas, and pro-Palestinian sentiments on social media, influencing millions of people around the world. The mainstream media coverage of these events was also skewed against Israel, with none other than the New York Times dedicating their front page with a headline, quote, "They were just children," with individual pictures of Palestinian children whom the New York Times claims were killed in that conflict, presumably by Israel. Within hours of the front page story, activists like Hussein Abu Bakr Mansour, who I retweeted, found at least one of the photos was a fake. He wrote, quote, "It's literally a random photo from cute Muslim toddlers, online photo stocks that have been circulating for many years." The next day, the Times issued a correction on the individual photo of that child, but issued no retraction or took any more serious responsibility for what they did. Meanwhile, the Jerusalem-based organization NGO Monitor reported that the Times front page story was based on information received from a Palestinian NGO with ties to the terrorist organization Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. You can't make this stuff up. Now let's turn our attention to members of the US Congress. The so-called squad coordinated their attacks on Israel during the May conflict, with Rashida Tlaib, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Cori Bush tweeting, quote, "Apartheid states aren't democracies." Tlaib repeatedly accused Israel of, quote-unquote, apartheid, and Ilhan Omar accused Israel of committing, quote, acts of terrorism for defending Israeli citizens. Now, we all know that soon after the May conflict, Tlaib, Omar, and Ocasio-Cortez blocked funding in Congress for the restocking of Israel's defensive Iron Dome system. Here is where this narrative against Jews and Israel got to be very personal for American Jewry. For a long time now, we have unfortunately gotten used to a pattern in Europe where events would take place, a conflict would take place between Israel and the Palestinians, and then Jews were attacked on the streets of London and Berlin and Paris. We never, prior to this conflict this last May, experienced that same pattern, but we did here in America for the first time in our history as American Jews. For the first time in our history as American Jews, there were Palestinian flag-waving mobs who drove through Los Angeles and New York, and they were looking for Jews to beat up. And you know what? When they found those Jews, they got out of their cars and they started to physically attack those Jews. This happened all over the US. We also found our synagogues under attack in places like Skokie, Illinois, Salt Lake City, Utah, and Tucson, Arizona. Here's what I can tell you. And also I want to mention Bal Harbour, Miami, right here. There was a family walking home from shul on Shabbat. Car drives by and they shout at the family, "Free Palestine, die Jew, F you Jew, and I'm going to rape your wife." Eventually, the driver witnessed this attack. He was armed and he managed to get these people to leave this Jewish family alone. My friends, this is where I turn to you. Confronting anti-Semitism is difficult, but here's the reality. There is also a no more noble cause in the world than to stand with the Jew, and that is what each of you are here tonight doing. You are here standing with your Jewish neighbors here in the US, and you're standing by the Jew among nations, and that is the Jewish state of Israel. And truly, as I look at my children and the future that they will inherit, I am optimistic for them, and here are the reasons why. This last year, I traveled 2 times to Latin America with the Latino Coalition for Israel, and with Apostle Mario Bramnik, with some other friends who are here in the audience tonight. And we went together to Guatemala. Guatemala, the first country to move their embassy to Jerusalem after the United States. And we met with the brave leaders of that country. But also we met with the spiritual leaders and the faith leaders, the people who are the moral compass of the decision makers. And it was the same experience on a recent visit to Brazil that I undertook with the Latino Coalition for Israel, where again, we met with the most senior levels of the government, and we were hosted by one of the largest churches in Brazil. And that is where, again, I felt the love for the Jewish people, the love for Jerusalem, and the love for the Jewish state of Israel. And what I can tell you is that the world is truly a safer place for the work of Latino Coalition for Israel. And what I want to make clear is that we're living in a moment when there are forces that want to destroy God. They want to destroy the family unit. They want to destroy our basic understanding of what is a female and what is a male. And in this moment, when our most basic values as Americans and as people of faith are under attack, at this moment we have to come together. And so I ask you this. The next time that Israel is under attack, which inevitably she will be, will you go on your social media and ask your children and ask your children's friends and your church group and everyone you're on a group text message, will you ask them to go on their social media and to stand with Israel? And when Israel needs our help in Congress, will you pick up the phone and let your member of Congress know that you want them to stand with Israel? And tonight, when you go home, when you go online, I would like everyone to let their members of Congress know that any funding for Gaza needs to be predicated on releasing the 2 Jewish bodies of our 2 Israeli soldiers. And also, please go online and sign the pledge to combat anti-Semitism at combatantisemitismmovement.org, because, as you heard earlier, this is the moment when we need our Christian friends to stand with us. And this is the moment that we need every Jew to get her voice heard. And now today is when we need to unite, we need to join forces and remind the world that we believe in our common humanity. We believe in a world with God, and that we believe. Thank you so much.